The road was almost empty, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through fields that had long surrendered their crops. The sun was sinking behind a line of low trees, leaving only the sharp afterglow of heat and insects. The light at that hour, gold thinning into gray, made every surface metallic. Dust hovered above the ditches like smoke that would not disperse. Officer Harlan Dent sat in his cruiser with the engine running, air conditioning low, the smell of vinyl and stale coffee thick in his nose. His hand rested on the wheel in a casual readiness, the other tapping the base of the radio microphone. He watched the black sedan ahead of him roll to a stop beneath the blinking caution light, at an intersection that rarely saw another vehicle. Her brake lights glowed steady, then flickered. A small thing, he told himself. Just a small thing. He flipped the switch. The siren coughed once, a single warning note, before settling into the rhythm of red and blue. It washed over the trees and over the woman's car like a pulse, drenching the road in alternating guilt and authority. When he approached, he did it by the book, hand resting on the holster, body angled, posture trained into him at the academy. He could see her silhouette through the rear window, unmoving, head slightly bowed as if listening to something he could not hear. She rolled down the window halfway when he rapped his knuckle against the glass. "Evenin', ma'am," he said. "You know why I stopped you?" Her eyes met his, calm, unhurried. "No, officer." The voice was low, clear. It did not tremble. He told her it was a taillight. He told her it could have been dangerous on a dark road like this. He said it with the tone of authority borrowed from every training video and every superior who had ever looked down at him with disappointment. She nodded once, not in agreement but acknowledgement, as if registering sound rather than meaning. When she handed him her license, he noticed the name, Naomi Clegg. But it meant nothing to him then. Just another name to type, another line on the screen. Back at the cruiser, he ran the plates. Nothing, no record, no alert. Clean. That somehow irritated him. The clean ones always did. The ones who didn't argue, who didn't even try to explain. They made his uniform feel heavy, like he was pretending to be what he wasn't sure he believed in. He stepped out again. The evening had cooled. The air smelled faintly of burnt rubber and pine. "Mind stepping out of the vehicle, ma'am?" She hesitated. Not defiance, just the pause of someone thinking through unnecessary obedience. Then she opened the door, slow, deliberate. Her movements had a grace that felt almost accusatory, as though she were allowing him to see how needless this was. He asked for consent to search the car. She said, "Why would you need to do that?" The question, quiet without fear, stung, not because of what it said, but because of what it implied, that she saw the performance for what it was. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." "Then do it." The words were not loud, but they carried weight. He told her to step to the side of the car. She did. The gravel crunched under her shoes, soft and even. He felt his pulse rise, not from danger but from something uglier. The feeling of being observed, measured and found wanting. Hands on the hood. She obeyed. The metal still radiated the day's heat. Her palms flattened against it. The veins on the back of her hands caught the patrol lights, turning red, then blue, then red again. He called for backup, though none was needed. A habit of procedure, a shield of noise. When he asked if she had anything on her he should know about, she did not answer. Silence stretched between them like a thread pulled taut. He repeated the question. Nothing. Her breath was calm. He could hear the low hum of cicadas, the steady rotation of the car's lights. His own heart pressing against his vest. "Ma'am, I need you to cooperate." Still silence. And then something inside him, small, almost imperceptible, broke. Not a snap, but a shift, the way a building settles before a collapse. He reached for her purse, dropped it on the hood. Lip balm, keys, folded paper. He found nothing, and that emptiness enraged him further. He ordered her to kneel. She did not move. He placed a hand on her shoulder, pressed harder than necessary. She knelt, slowly, deliberately, like someone performing an old ritual she despised but still remembered. When he saw the small pair of scissors in the back seat, hair shears, the kind used in salons, something in him seized on it as justification. "You can't bring this kind of thing into holding," he said. Though she wasn't in holding, though there was no reason she would be. She didn't respond. Her silence felt like an indictment. He picked up the shears, the metal cold in his hand. The red-blue light reflected off the blades, alternating guilt and absolution. "You think you're better than me," he murmured, though she hadn't spoken. She looked up, eyes steady. In them was no fear, only pity. The gesture that followed was not planned, not professional, not defensible. He stepped forward, the gravel shifting under his boots. He caught a fistful of her hair, thick, coiled, smelling faintly of citrus and sweat, and pulled. The scissors opened with a metallic click. The first cut made no sound. Only the wind carried the hair away, strands catching the light before falling into the dust. She did not flinch. Her silence held. He continued until the ground around her looked like dark feathers scattered by a storm. Her scalp shone faintly under the lights, smooth, vulnerable, unbroken. When he stopped, breathing hard, he realized how quiet it had become. Even the insects seemed to have withdrawn. She lifted her head, met his gaze again. There was no plea, no hatred, only the stillness of someone who had already survived the worst of a world that never learned to look at itself. He stepped back, suddenly aware of his own reflection in the car's mirror, distorted by the red and blue light, split between them. He looked like two different men switching places too quickly to decide which was real. He cleared his throat. "You're under arrest." Her voice, when it came, was a whisper.
"For what?"
He hesitated. The question landed like a stone dropped in water, the ripples spreading outward, quiet but endless. "Failure to comply," he said. He guided her to the cruiser, hand firm on her arm. Her scalp caught the overhead light, a pale crown. As he drove her back toward town, the patrol car's reflection flashed briefly in the side mirror. Red, blue, red, blue. A steady confession pulsing across the empty road. The fields outside were silent again. The sun had vanished. The system, as always, remained. The county station was built like a promise no one remembered making. Square, windowless except for narrow slits. Its walls the color of unspoken compromise. The parking lot hummed under floodlights that attracted moths in slow, suicidal circles. Inside, the air was cool and recycled, smelling faintly of ammonia and the syrup of machine coffee. Officer Harlan Dent entered with the gait of a man who wanted to appear unfazed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a constant electrical drone that flattened the air. His boots left small crescents of dust on the tiled floor, proof that the outside world, the one with soil and wind and consequence, still existed somewhere. He led the woman through intake. She did not resist. She did not speak. Her shaved head gleamed under the white light like an accusation the building itself refused to hear. The other officers looked up only briefly before returning to their screens, their paperwork, their routines of moral sedation. One of them, Sergeant Lang, glanced at Harlan as he passed. "What's this?" "Non-compliance," Harlan said. Lang nodded once, eyes already sliding back to the vending machine. "Put it in the system. It was that simple." The words flattened everything. The night, the humiliation, the scissors, the silence. Put it in the system. At the desk, Harlan sat before the monitor. The cursor blinked in an empty form like a metronome measuring guilt. He typed Clegg, Naomi. The name still meant nothing to him. He filled the fields in methodically, the way he'd been trained. Traffic stop. Verbal resistance. Use of force. Minimal. The sound of typing filled the room, sterile and mechanical. A coffee mug with a chipped rim sat beside him. The ring it left on the desk, a small brown bruise. He looked at it longer than necessary, tracing the edge with his thumb before returning to the keyboard. Incident summary. He began. Suspect refused to comply with lawful order. Officer applied controlled force. Subject subdued without injury. He stopped, deleted, rewrote. The words shifted like insects trying to crawl out of light. He added, "Subject displayed erratic behavior," then paused again, aware that the phrase excused everything and explained nothing. Across the room, a television mounted in the corner played muted news. Campaign coverage of Sheriff Raymond Clegg shaking hands beneath banners reading, "Community First." The sheriff's smile was precise, mathematical. His wife's absence from the footage went unnoticed. Harlan's eyes flicked to the holding area beyond the glass partition. Naomi sat on the bench still, head lowered, the fluorescent light above her flickering in uneven rhythm. Every few seconds, her face slipped between shadow and exposure. She did not look toward him. A young dispatcher entered, balancing 2 paper trays of coffee. She set one on the counter, smiled briefly at Harlan. "Long night?" "Yeah," he said, eyes on the screen. "What did she do?" "Didn't listen." The dispatcher nodded as though that were a crime worthy of architecture. The radio hissed from the corner, words half swallowed by static. "Unit 4. Domestic disturbance." "Unit 4 respond." Then silence. Routine continued. Forms stamped, calls logged. Lives entered into systems with the efficiency of deletion. Harlan printed the report. The machine stuttered, spat it out line by line, the smell of toner sharp in the air. He read it once, twice. The sentences looked official. They had the shape of truth even if they contained none. He signed at the bottom, Officer H. Dent. The paper absorbed the ink instantly. Final. Clean. When he carried it to the records tray, he noticed the wall clock above the copier, its second hand jerking unevenly. Each tick seemed slower than the one before, as though time itself had grown reluctant to move forward. Sergeant Lang walked past again, coffee in hand. "Everything squared?" "Yeah." "Good. Sheriff will want clean logs when he gets back." "He's out glad-handing tonight." "Right." Lang hesitated, studying Harlan's face. "She give you trouble?" "Nothing worth mentioning." Lang nodded again, the conversation ending where truth would have begun. Through the glass, Naomi shifted slightly, her hands folded in her lap. She looked like a statue placed there for observation, evidence of restraint rather than justice. A single hair fragment clung to her collarbone, black against her skin. The fluorescent light trembled again, dimmed, then steadied, as though the building had decided to keep breathing. Harlan looked away. He opened a drawer, found a wipe, cleaned the small coffee stain from the desk. The motion was automatic, precise. He dried it with a paper towel, leaving no trace. The station hummed. A printer somewhere restarted. The vending machine clicked. Someone laughed down the hall. The casual sound of men who believed the world outside these walls was far enough away to ignore. Harlan rubbed his eyes. Behind his lids, the image of her hair falling in slow arcs returned unbidden. He told himself it had been procedure, restraint, control, authority. He told himself the same thing again, slower, quieter. When he looked back toward the holding cell, she had raised her head. Their eyes met through the glass. There was no hostility in hers, only a terrible stillness, the kind that forced reflection. He turned away first. The monitor went into sleep mode, its glow fading into a dark rectangle. His reflection stared back, face colorless under the flickering lights, badge glinting dully. For a moment he saw the red-blue reflection from earlier overlay his features, as though the patrol car's lights had followed him inside. Unwilling to let the scene end, he exhaled, long and low, and opened a fresh incident form. The cursor blinked again, insistent, waiting for the next justification. In the holding cell, Naomi closed her eyes. The light above her hummed louder, then dimmed once more, not fully out, but tired, like a conscience learning endurance. And somewhere beyond the walls, the sheriff's name echoed through applause, his voice promising accountability, his smile framed by cameras. The county seal shimmered behind him, polished to brightness. Inside the station, a single bulb flickered 3 times before stabilizing. No one looked up. The paperwork cooled on the desk, the ink dry, the language complete. Non-compliance, force applied. Nothing more was required. Nothing less was allowed. Morning came without ceremony, just a slow whitening of the sky and the sound of the air vents coming back to life. The county station, sealed in its own stale climate, barely registered the change. Its lights hummed with the same dull persistence as the night before. The smell of reheated coffee and disinfectant mixed into a kind of institutional morning breath. By 7, the first shifts were changing. Officers moved with the fatigue of repetition, exchanging nods that meant nothing. The vending machine whirred again. Someone coughed. The printer resumed its slow exhalation of paper. Sheriff Raymond Clegg entered through the glass doors at precisely 7:12 a.m. He didn't hurry. He never did. His arrival carried a gravity born not of size or volume, but of practiced stillness. Conversations folded into silence at his presence, not out of fear, but out of habit, the reflexive quiet that institutions develop around power. He wore the same uniform as his men, but his was immaculate. The badge gleamed sharp as coin. The boots, polished to an impossible shine, caught the light in precise reflections. Every step seemed to measure the floor. He greeted no one. His nods were almost imperceptible. His face, broad and calm, had the controlled neutrality of a politician used to being photographed. Only his eyes moved, slow and deliberate, scanning the desks, the unfiled papers, the faces that pretended to be busy. In his office, the blinds were half closed, cutting the sunlight into even strips. The air smelled faintly of cedar polish. A small American flag stood perfectly upright in its holder, untouched by dust. He removed his hat, placed it on the corner of his desk, and began sorting through the stack of reports left by the night shift. His fingers moved with the methodical precision of a surgeon working through routine incisions. He read without expression, his pen clicking occasionally as he underlined details that required follow-up. Domestic disturbance. Petty theft. DUI. Nothing unusual. Then, near the bottom of the pile, a stapled packet, slightly misaligned, bearing the familiar letterhead. Incident report. Traffic stop. He flipped it open. The name met him like a small stone dropped in clear water, creating rings of disbelief that widened silently. Clegg. Naomi. The first reaction was physical. A tightening of the jaw, the small twitch near the temple. His hand stilled over the paper. The light shifted, catching the boot's reflection under his desk. Two narrow crescents of brightness trembling across the floor. He read the description twice. Traffic stop, non-compliance, controlled force applied. The words were clean. Too clean. The kind of language meant to sterilize. He turned to the next page. The officer's name, Harlan Dent. He set the papers down, spine straightening. The office had gone impossibly still. Beyond the door, muffled voices carried. Laughter, a drawer closing, the shuffle of routine life. Inside, silence became structure. He pressed the intercom button. Lang, he said. Yes, Sheriff? Bring Officer Dent to me. A pause. Right away. He released the button, folded his hands over the report. His fingertips rested lightly on the printed name, as though confirming that it existed. His wedding band glinted under the fluorescent light, a sharp ring of gold against the paper. Outside, Harlan Dent was drinking cold coffee from a foam cup when the summons came. Lang's tone gave nothing away. Sheriff wants you in his office. When? Now. The cup shook slightly in Harlan's hand. He threw it away, wiped his palms on his uniform, and followed. The hallway seemed narrower than usual. He knocked once. Come in, Clegg said. The sheriff did not look up at first. He gestured to the chair opposite his desk, eyes fixed on the report. Harlan sat, the air around him dense, unmoving. Clegg finally raised his gaze. His expression was unreadable. Not anger, not shock, just a terrible quiet. You had an arrest last night, he said. Yes, sir. Routine stop? Yes, sir. Clegg turned a page. The movement was slow, deliberate. Non-compliance? Yes, sir. He leaned back slightly. Describe it, Harlan swallowed. Driver refused orders to exit vehicle. Displayed nonverbal resistance. I applied minimal force. Minimal. The word lingered, stripped bare. Yes, sir. Clegg tapped the edge of the report with his finger, then looked directly at him. The silence stretched until Harlan could hear the hum of the fluorescent tubes. You shaved her head, the sheriff said. Harlan froze. His throat clicked before sound returned. Sir, the suspect, say her name. Sir? Say her name, Officer Dent. Harlan's voice wavered. Naomi Clegg. The sound of it, spoken aloud, altered the air itself. The sheriff's eyes did not move, but everything else in the room seemed to contract around them. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder. The light on the sheriff's boots flickered faintly as a cloud passed outside. Clegg rose from his chair. The movement was controlled, deliberate, almost ceremonial. He walked to the blinds and opened them halfway, letting sunlight slice across the desk, illuminating the report like evidence. When you took her, he said quietly, where did you bring her? The holding room, sir. She's here. Yes, sir. Clegg turned. His face was calm, too calm, the kind of composure that meant the real storm had gone inward. "Bring her to my office." The words were soft, but they carried the weight of command. Not raised, not urgent, but absolute. Harlan stood, his knees stiff, nodding automatically. "Yes, Sheriff." As he reached for the doorknob, Clegg's voice came again, almost a whisper. "And don't speak to her." Harlan hesitated, then left. Clegg remained standing. The sunlight reached his desk now, catching the dust in the air, tiny particles drifting like remnants of something once alive. He looked down at the report again, at the clean lines of justification, at the absence of truth. He placed his hand over the page. His fingers covered her name completely. For a long moment, he said nothing. Outside, through the office window, the hallway filled with muted motion, Harlan walking, Lang murmuring instructions, the faint squeak of a cell door opening. The sheriff adjusted his belt, checked the crease of his trousers, and glanced once more at his boots. The reflection there, bright, precise, showed the room upside down. He straightened his tie, exhaled once, and waited. The building itself seemed to hold its breath. The lights buzzed faintly overhead, then steadied as though the system, too, understood what silence must now endure. The door closed with a soft click that sounded final. Sheriff Raymond Clegg stood behind his desk, posture straight, hands clasped loosely in front of him. He had dismissed the deputies with emotion. 2 fingers, no words. The office was still. The air conditioning hum a thin thread of sound between them. Naomi sat in the chair opposite, her back unbowed. The fluorescent light above them hummed, steady but cold, reflecting faintly off her bare scalp. The skin there caught the light unevenly, showing the faint texture of stubble, a map of violation. She wore the same clothes from the night before, a white shirt now wrinkled and dark slacks smudged with dust. Her shoes were removed at intake. Her feet rested flat on the floor. Her hands, folded in her lap, were steady. Between them, the county seal hung on the wall, bronze polished to a false luster. Its motto, integrity and service, gleamed above the emblem of a blindfolded figure holding scales that had never balanced. The seal's reflection shimmered across the sheriff's nameplate, bisecting his title like a line drawn through an old lie. He spoke first. His voice was low, measured. "They tell me you wouldn't speak." She met his gaze without response. "You sat there all night," he continued. "Didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't request medical attention. Didn't say a word." Still, she said nothing. The silence filled the room like rising water. He tried again, voice slightly harder. "You understand what this looks like, Naomi?" Her eyes moved briefly to the county seal, then back to him. "Yes." He waited for more. Nothing came. He exhaled, walked around the desk, and stood near the window. The blinds cut the morning light into disciplined stripes across his face. "The officer who did it, Dent. He didn't know who you were." "I know." "He'll be disciplined." "For what?" He turned. "For what he did." Her voice was quiet, almost tender in its clarity. "And what exactly did he do?" The question lingered, demanding specificity in a room allergic to it. Clegg hesitated. "He acted beyond protocol. He acted according to his nature," she said. "The uniform just gave him permission." He frowned. "You think I trained him to do that?" "I think the building did." He sat down across from her, folding his hands. The polished surface of the desk mirrored the two of them, him upright, composed, her smaller, shorn, illuminated by the light that avoided his face. "You're making this political," he said. "You already did." He looked down briefly, the movement of a man searching for words not yet rehearsed. "Naomi, there's going to be noise about this. Reporters, oversight boards, protests maybe. We can contain it, but we need alignment. We can't look divided. We are divided." He paused. "Not publicly." A faint smile crossed her lips, not amusement, but recognition. "Always the performance." "You know how this works," he said, tone sharpening. "If we lose credibility, we lose everything we've built." She tilted her head slightly. "You built this." Her calmness unnerved him more than anger would have. He rose again, pacing behind her. The click of his polished boots echoed softly, 2 measured beats for every breath she took. He stopped behind her chair, looking down at the pale curve of her head. "Why didn't you tell him who you were?" "Would it have mattered?" "Yes," he said too quickly. She turned to face him. "That's the problem." He said nothing. The truth in her words hovered between them, heavy, undeniable. Her voice softened as if speaking to something far older than him. "You've spent your life polishing symbols, the badge, the speeches, the handshakes. You think if you shine them bright enough, people won't see the rust beneath. I uphold the law." "You maintain order," she corrected. "Not the same thing." He stood still, his shadow cutting across the floor, bisecting the county seal's reflection. "You think silence makes you pure?" he asked quietly. "You think by saying nothing, you're not part of this?" Her eyes lifted to meet his again. "Silence isn't purity. It's survival." For the first time, he looked uncertain. The line of his jaw softened. The hand resting on the desk trembled once before stilling. "You humiliate me," he said. "Not as accusation, but as confession." "No," she replied. "I expose you." The clock on the wall ticked audibly now. Each second seemed to echo. He turned toward the window again, watching a county truck pull into the lot. "They'll want a statement," he said. "Something that calms it all down. You'll say it was a misunderstanding, that Officer Dent acted alone. You'll say you forgive him." She didn't move. "And if I don't, then it all burns." "Maybe it should." Her voice was quiet, almost prayer-like. He turned back, the calm authority cracking slightly. "You would destroy everything for a spectacle?" "For truth," she said. "It's not the same thing." He looked at her long and hard. The years between them, dinners eaten in silence, campaigns run on borrowed morality, the steady erosion of intimacy into image, all seemed to press into this moment. He reached into the desk drawer, pulled out a folded handkerchief, and placed it gently on the table in front of her. "Cover your head," he said, "before anyone else sees you like this." She didn't touch it. "You're ashamed," she said. "I'm protecting you. You're protecting the office." Neither moved. The air felt colder now, as though the ventilation itself recoiled. Finally, she rose from the chair, leaving the handkerchief untouched. She looked once at the county seal, the blindfolded figure, the uneven scales, and then back at her husband. "I won't be part of your correction," she said. He opened his mouth to reply, but she had already turned. The door opened quietly, her bare scalp catching the doorway light one last time before she stepped out. The sheriff remained still. The seal glowed behind him in the artificial light, its bronze surface reflecting both of them in warped proportion, power towering over dignity, the system over the individual. Outside, footsteps receded down the hall. Inside, the room seemed larger now, emptied of breath, heavy with the sound of its own silence. Clegg sat, staring at the handkerchief left folded on the desk. The fabric's edge trembled slightly in the current from the vent, a small, useless attempt at movement. He looked up at the county seal once more, its blindfolded eyes gleaming under the cold lamp. For the first time in years, he understood what it meant to look at something polished and see nothing reflected back. The room smelled of toner, cold coffee, and nervous authority. A conference table stretched the length of the sheriff's briefing room, its polished surface reflecting faces half lit by the fluorescent glare above. The morning light fought through the blinds but could not enter cleanly. It fractured against the glass, breaking into pale shards that lay across the table like evidence. They called it a strategy session. In truth, it was triage. Sheriff Raymond Clegg sat at the head of the table, jacket folded neatly over the back of his chair, tie knotted perfectly. Around him, the mayor, 2 county attorneys, Sergeant Lang, and a communications officer who looked too young to understand the vocabulary she was about to inherit. Each had a notepad, though no one truly wrote. The copier in the corner hummed ceaselessly, spitting forms that nobody would read, but everyone would sign. The mayor broke the silence first. His voice was careful, dry. "We're calling this what it is, an isolated incident." Clegg didn't answer. Optics are bad, the communications officer added, flipping through a folder filled with drafts. Social media is already circulating the dashcam stills. The image of her, she hesitated, glancing at the sheriff. Well, it's everywhere. The air thickened. The attorney nearest her cleared his throat. We emphasize process failure, not intent. Officer Dent exceeded protocol. The sheriff responded appropriately. That's the narrative. The copier whirred again, feeding more paper. The repetition filled the pauses like an institutional heartbeat. Clegg finally spoke, voice even, almost disinterested. And Mrs. Clegg? She's declined to speak, said Lang. Declined. She won't press charges, won't give a statement, won't confirm or deny anything. Just sits there. The communications officer leaned forward, eyes bright with anxiety. That's actually worse. Outrage we can control. It burns fast. Silence lingers. It makes people imagine. No one spoke. The copier clicked again. The mayor clasped his hands. You'll need to issue a public statement by tomorrow, Ray. Something calm, procedural. Use words like healing, transparency, community trust. People like those. They don't mean anything, but they work. Clegg nodded once, eyes fixed on the table's reflection. The light there showed his face divided by shadow. One side illuminated, the other lost to gray. He spoke quietly. And Dent? Administrative leave, Lang said. Standard procedure. Clegg looked up, his expression unreadable. Paid? A pause. Yes, sir. The sheriff's eyes returned to the reflection. Make it unpaid. The mayor stiffened. That might look vindictive. It is. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, brittle. The attorney smoothed his tie. We'd prefer to avoid personal emotion in the narrative. Keep it professional. Clegg's tone sharpened. He humiliated my wife. And if you make it personal, the attorney countered, you invite scrutiny. People will ask how your wife was mistaken for a suspect. You don't want those questions. The word wife hung in the air like smoke, visible, suffocating. Clegg leaned back, exhaling slowly. His reflection trembled in the table's surface, warped by the faint vibration of the copier. Containment, he murmured. That's what you're all here for. The mayor nodded, relieved by the return of reason. Exactly. We manage this internally. Keep it small, controlled. The copier groaned, jamming briefly before spitting out a crumpled page, a form half-printed, half-erased. No one moved to fix it. Outside in the hallway, the building continued its usual hum. Radios crackling, footsteps echoing, the mechanical calm of bureaucracy continuing as though morality were a misplaced document. Lang shifted uncomfortably. What about her, Sheriff? Naomi? Clegg's eyes stayed on the reflection. What about her? She's unnerving the staff. He looked up. How? She doesn't look angry. Doesn't say anything. Just sits in that interview room with her head uncovered. Folks are afraid to walk past the window. Clegg closed his eyes briefly, then stood. The chair made no sound against the floor, only the soft creak of leather as it gave way. Let her sit, he said. The communications officer looked confused. Sir? Let her sit, he repeated. The longer she's silent, the more they'll want to fill the silence for her. Eventually they'll talk themselves tired. He straightened his sleeves, smoothed the crease in his trousers, and turned to the window. Beyond the glass, the small courtyard shimmered in late morning heat. A janitor pushed a mop in slow circles, water pooling and drying in irregular shapes. The reflection in the window showed him doubled, one image sharp, the other slightly offset. Two sheriffs, two truths. Behind him, the meeting resumed its mechanical rhythm. Words like containment, optics, damage control, and community reassurance floated across the table, indistinguishable from one another. The copier restarted its monotone exhalation, feeding fresh sheets into the tray. Each page looked identical to the last. Black ink, white space, official language shaped to carry no meaning. Later that afternoon, Harlan Dent stood in the small side office used for disciplinary notices. The blinds were half drawn, and the clock above the file cabinet ticked too loud. Sergeant Lang read from a prepared statement. Effective immediately. Officer Harlan Dent is placed on unpaid administrative leave pending review. You are to surrender your badge, firearm, and access credentials. Harlan nodded, face pale, jaw tight. His hands shook slightly as he unpinned the badge, a small metallic sun stripped of its orbit, and placed it on the desk. Lang avoided his eyes. Sheriff's orders. Harlan tried to speak, but his throat caught. He managed only, "He didn't even talk to me." Lang's voice softened. "Count yourself lucky." As Harlan turned to leave, his reflection caught briefly in the office window. Uniform half unbuttoned, face ghosted by the glare. Behind the reflection, the copier machine continued to print in rhythmic waves, as though the department itself needed constant evidence of its own denial. By evening, the corridors had emptied. The air was colder and the light harsher. Clegg walked alone past the records room. The copier still ran, unsupervised, feeding paper into a growing stack that curled at the edges. Each page carried the same header: Internal Report, Confidential. The ink smelled sharp, chemical. He stopped to watch it for a moment, and the machine swallowing blank pages, spitting out lies with mechanical indifference. When he reached the interview room, the hallway light caught on the glass. Naomi sat inside, head bowed slightly, hands folded in her lap. The overhead lamp made her scalp gleam like marble. She looked up when she sensed him. Their eyes met through the pane, two reflections overlaid, each faintly visible in the glass. He lifted a hand, not as greeting, not as command, but as something between apology and surrender. She didn't move. The glass reflected him back, a man cleaved in two by the surface. His outline fractured, his authority diffused. Behind him, the copier whirred again, repeating the same sound, the same motion, the same self-justifying rhythm. He turned away first. The lights in the hallway flickered once, then steadied. The machine kept working. The system kept breathing. The silence inside the interview room grew louder than all of it. The courthouse smelled of bleach and stale air, the scent of cleanliness used to mask something rotting beneath. Rows of folding chairs faced a long mahogany table elevated by a shallow dais. The seal of the county, a bronze disc depicting scales held aloft by invisible hands, hung on the wall behind the panel. Cameras stood at the back like mechanical sentinels, their red lights blinking in perpetual vigilance. Outside, the morning had already burned white, but in here, the light was artificial, fluorescent, steady, indifferent. The hearing was called to order at 9:03 a.m. Mere reporters rustled their notepads. Microphones hummed faintly with interference. The audience, county employees, journalists, a handful of citizens, shifted in their seats, whispering names like Clegg and Dent and the woman. They didn't say her name. They didn't need to. Sheriff Raymond Clegg entered first, his boots clicking against the linoleum floor in slow, deliberate rhythm. The sound was clean, precise, every step a reminder of hierarchy. His face was composed, almost serene, though the corners of his mouth trembled once before stilling. He wore his uniform as if it were armor. The chairman of the panel, a retired judge with translucent skin and a voice like rusted iron, gestured for him to sit. Cameras turned toward him in synchronized motion. He cleared his throat, unfolded the sheet of paper before him, and began to read. "Last week," he said, voice even, "an incident occurred within my department that does not reflect our values of service and integrity. Steps have been taken to ensure accountability. Officer Harlan Dent has been suspended pending investigation. I take full responsibility for the department's response." His tone was polished, professional. The words were chosen by committee, each phrase pre-approved, each pause calculated. He continued, "We are committed to healing the division this event has caused within our community. Transparency and trust will guide us forward." When he finished, the air did not move. The only sound was the hum of the lights, the faint mechanical breath of the cameras. The chairman nodded. "Thank you, Sheriff. We'll now hear from Officer Dent." Harlan rose from his seat near the back. His uniform was gone, replaced by a wrinkled white shirt, sleeves rolled up, tie loose. He looked smaller without the badge, as if stripped of permission to occupy the same space. As he took the stand, the microphone picked up the shallow rasp of his breathing. He began too softly. "I was conducting a routine traffic stop. The suspect failed to produce proper identification." He paused. The word suspect hung between them, sour in the air. "I followed procedure," he continued, but his voice wavered. She was non-compliant. I issued verbal commands. When she refused to, the chairman interrupted. Officer Dent, were you aware of her identity at the time? No, sir. Would it have changed your actions? Dent hesitated. The silence expanded, filling the room like slow-moving smoke. I don't know, he said finally. It was the truest thing he had ever said in his life. The cameras whirred. The sheriff did not move. His jaw tightened, the muscles in his neck taut beneath the collar. The chairman nodded once, turned to the audience. Is Mrs. Naomi Clegg present? The room shifted. Heads turned. The door at the back opened. She entered without a word. No escort, no lawyer, no notes in her hand. Her head was uncovered, the faint regrowth of hair forming a soft shadow against her scalp. The overhead lights found her immediately, made her appear almost luminescent against the dull palette of uniforms and beige walls. She did not walk quickly. Each step was measured, deliberate. The sound of her shoes against the tile, faint, rhythmic, seemed louder than the sheriff's entrance, louder than the entire morning's proceedings. She did not take the witness stand. She did not sit. Instead, she stood in the aisle, facing the panel, her hands at her sides. The room went silent. Even the fluorescent hum seemed to retreat. For a moment, no one knew what to do. The chairman leaned forward. Mrs. Clegg, if you wish to make a statement, I have none. The words were calm, unshaken. Do you wish to testify? No. Her voice carried without strain. The syllables fell into the air like stones dropped into still water. The chairman shifted, uncomfortable. You understand, Mrs. Clegg. Your perspective could aid this inquiry. She looked at him, not with defiance, but with a stillness that left no space for persuasion. Then she turned her gaze toward her husband. Clegg met her eyes. The practiced calm of his posture faltered for the first time. His reflection in the polished tabletop trembled faintly, as though the surface itself recoiled from the truth. Naomi spoke again, softly, almost to herself. You have all already written what you need to hear. No one responded. The silence that followed was immense, not absence, but presence, a dense, unspoken verdict that filled every crevice of the room. Somewhere, a light flickered. It happened once, then again. A brief stutter in the fluorescent line above the panel. Each pulse revealed in momentary flashes the imperfections of the chamber, the uneven paint, the scuffed floor, the water stains spidering down from a neglected vent. Under that strobing truth, the walls seemed alive with every compromise ever made inside them. Naomi did not flinch. The lights steadied again, their hum resuming. The audience exhaled collectively, unaware they'd been holding breath. The chairman cleared his throat. Mrs. Clegg, if you refuse to participate, I am participating, she said. That was all. She turned, walked out the way she came. No one stopped her. The sound of the door closing was gentle but final, like a gavel with moral clarity instead of authority. The sheriff sat motionless. His prepared statement lay folded in half before him, creased so sharply it could cut. Harlan Dent stared at the floor, hands clasped tightly enough to whiten the knuckles. The cameras continued recording, but no one spoke into them. They captured nothing but stillness. The system caught briefly in the reflection of its own shame. Outside, the noon sun pressed against the courthouse windows, too bright to enter. The building's lights flickered once more, a final, unintentional confession. And for the first time in years, the silence inside was pure, not empty but full of everything that had been said without words, full of everything that would remain.